The Hollow Below. Chapter 1, Beneath the Snow, a Pulse. It is not beautiful, but it is lasting. Every wall bears the soot of decades, every floor the prints of boots long buried. Even silence has weight here. The air is always warm, thick with iron and breath. Magic does not hum in this place. It flickers rarely, like a taper in a stone chapel, kept alive by rites older than remembrance. A cracked ward above a nursery door. A vial of heat salt sealed with an old sigil. Nothing loud, nothing grand, only what survives. For in Niron, invention feeds the many, and magic is for the desperate. High above the mines, carved into a fault vein of obsidian that rises like a spine against the cavern's wall, stands the obsidian seminary. Few ever enter. Fewer return. Fewer return. Its mystics dwell within cloisters chiseled by hand and sanctified by bloodless pact. They speak little and bless less. Yet when the hollow's heat faltered last cycle and the pumps stilled for 9 breaths, it was the mystics who descended. They touched no machines, they uttered no word, and still the warmth returned. That is their way. Most speak of them in reverence. A few in fear, but none with certainty. Not even Ryn Gavelock, who had once glimpsed them at a burial rite, shrouded, faceless, unmoving as the carved sentinels at the hollow's gate. Now he stood at the edge of a collapsed shaft, breath steaming slow, lamplight flickering in his gloved grip. Around him, the stone wept in silence. No wind, no sound beyond drip and creak and the settling dust. Came down fast, muttered the foreman beside him, voice low. No quake, no sign, just dropped. Ryn knelt beside the rubble. His joints ached. Cold sweat touched his spine beneath the hauler's harness. He brushed aside a curled shard of plating, then froze. There was flesh beneath. Torn, not crushed, not pierced by falling iron. Torn, clean, between the ribs. He rose slowly. His breath caught. The foreman did not yet see. "You will seal this shaft," Ryn said, voice hoarse. "No salvage, no further entry." The foreman blinked. "You saw something?" Ryn did not answer. He turned, lamp swaying, and began the long walk back toward the central hall, boots echoing against stone. For the first time in over 30 years, a man in Niron had not been taken by the earth. He had been taken by hands. And in this place, this world where the earth claimed so many, and men claimed no one, that was a wound far deeper than the shaft itself. Miners shuffled past with pick drills and rusted visors, not looking up. They moved like the dead who had forgotten to lie down. The hall was not a single place, but a web of crossings, vents thick with copper mesh, supply ducts that hissed in response to breath, and archways bowed with condensation. Glow globes hung in staggered ranks, some dimmed to embers. Each one burned oil drawn from below. At its heart stood a brazier, and beside it the overseer, a narrow man whose name none spoke unless forced. He was draped in heatskins trimmed with iron thread, pale eyes watching as Ryn approached. "You left your post," the overseer said. Ryn said nothing. He drew from his belt a strip of torn cloth, stained black with blood that had dried too fast. The overseer took it with bare fingers. He studied it for a breath, then turned his gaze to the brazier. "One of ours?" "He wore hollow patchwork," Ryn replied. "No identifier, but the make was local. Left side pierced. Precise." The overseer made a faint sound, not unlike a sigh choked off before birth. He cast the cloth into the flames where it curled and blackened. "The shaft will be sealed," he said. "We will mark it as unstable. They will ask," Ryn said. "Some already know." The overseer did not meet his eyes. "They will forget, as they forgot the last." Ryn felt the silence stretch like cooling steel. He did not speak the name of the man he had found. He did not know it. No records had surfaced, no kin had come. That night, as the second shift began and the bells rang out once more, a girl walked barefoot through the low ducts near the glass dryers. Her name was Lyra, and she carried a half-burnt taper. She stopped beside a grate and crouched, listening. There were voices, not from within the ducts, but beyond. A faint echo that seemed to bleed through the stone. A light with no flame, she whispered. He saw it too. She touched her fingers to the stone and drew a shape, a circle broken by a single line. The stone felt warm beneath her hand. Far above, beyond the reach of flame or pick, a bell tolled once within the obsidian seminary. No one marked it. No one spoke of it. But deep in the hollow, where memory did not sleep, something had begun to stir. Chapter 3, Iron-bound, tongue-tied. The clang of hammer on plate echoed like a judge's decree through the lower arcades. Ryn stood alone in a corridor lined with equipment lockers and rusted sigil plates, one hand resting on the brass grate of an unlit furnace shaft. It had once been a warm passage, now it was cold. He felt it in his bones. 3 deaths in silence, 1 known, 2 unspoken. But Ryn's instincts, honed on the surface where silence meant death, sensed the pattern tightening like a coil. He turned as footsteps approached. Even before the man rounded the corner, Ryn knew the gait, deliberate, careful, neither hurried nor slow. Kael Vorin, signal keeper, keeper of rhythm and runeline, and, once Ryn's closest friend. Kael wore the garb of his post, lined coat of oilcloth and dustweave, with a loop of brass keys clinking at his hip. His face was drawn, cheeks hollow, lips chapped by the pipe winds. His left eye bore the faint sheen of replaced sight, whisper glass, set rare but not unknown in those tasked with monitoring the line lanterns. "You should not be seen down here," Kael said without greeting. Ryn let the silence sit. When he did speak, his voice was low. "There's more. I need your access to the line logs. I want to see who was routed near the collapse." Kael folded his arms. The keys at his belt stilled. And if the logs were altered? Ryn looked at him then. Not sharply, but with a steadiness that spoke of old wounds scraped open anew. "Then I need to know who did it." Kael sighed and turned. "Come, we'll use the West Watch." They passed through low halls, deeper still, until they reached a narrow chamber filled with signal coils and echo spools. There, Kael retrieved a reel marked with obsidian wax and set it spinning. Faint voices emerged, layered and strained, call signs, shift reports, minor alerts. But beneath it, a break. A pause, then a whisper, break-in seal, path 9, heat, anomalous, no clearance. Then silence. Ryn leaned closer. "Whose voice?" Kael shook his head. No entry on the codebook. Could be old overlay. Could be purposefully masked. Ryn stepped back, eyes scanning the iron-bound walls. They breathed faintly with the warmth of old fire, now flickering low. "You still believe in the Hollow's order, Kael? That the rules are keeping the dark out?" Kael did not look at him. "Belief is a word for surface folk. Down here, we obey or we vanish." Ryn placed a hand on the console. "I need more than obedience. I need truth." Kael nodded once. "Then listen carefully. That shaft was sealed after the severance. Only a few knew how to open it. One was your overseer. The other," he hesitated, a breath passed, "was Veleth." The name echoed through Ryn like a thrown stone striking ice. He had not heard that name in years. It was not a name given lightly. Only etched brass plaques marking when each section had last been surveyed. The most recent was dated 61 years past. Ryn walked it with slow, careful steps, his lamp held close to the walls. On either side, great filing stacks slumbered in silence. Ledgers bound in oiled sinew, scrolls sealed in resin, and whisper-glass tablets too brittle for light. The hollow recorded everything, but it remembered little. He came to a small alcove inset with a carved stone basin and a sigil worn smooth by the passing of thousands of hands. A single figure waited there. Niron stood with her back straight and her gaze fixed on something only she could see. Her white eyes did not shift when Ryn approached. Her fingers, ink-stained and steady, moved across a thin sheet of vellum. "I thought you forgot where to find me," she said. "I forget nothing," Ryn replied. "Only choose what to carry." She gave a dry chuckle. "And what burden brings you down this old stair, steam hauler?" Ryn stepped into the alcove. "Records from the severance years. I want the logs for Veleth, and any mentions of Shaft 9. Isla did not move, her hand stilled above the page. "Veleth," she said slowly. "That name was locked. Then unlock it." Silence followed, not cold, but thick like breath, held too long. She turned then, and her blind eyes met his with precision. "Do you remember what the severance cost us, Ryn?" He said nothing. "We buried 12 in one day," Isla said. "And the 13th wasn't buried at all." Ryn lowered his lamp. The shadows trembled. "You think it started again?" she whispered. He nodded once. Isla reached into the wall. Her hand passed beneath the stone, as though dipping into still water. When she withdrew it, she held a small, rune-marked prism. Whisper glass. Old. She pressed it into his hand. "This is what remains." Ryn turned the prism over. Inside flickered threads of voice and light, pulsing faintly. Isla continued, voice low. "Veleth wasn't a killer, not then. He prevented one, or so they said. He spoke of a line that should not be crossed, even to save lives." "And they exiled him for it?" Isla nodded. "Some say exile, some say something deeper. They sealed the records. No trial, no rites, only silence." Ryn closed his hand around the prism. Then the line was crossed again. Isla's expression did not change, but a tremor moved through her fingers. "If Veleth has returned," she said, "the hollow is already unraveling." Ryn turned, stepping once more into the dust-lit dark, the prism cold in his palm. Behind him, Isla whispered to the stone, "May the Watchers forgive what memory cannot." Chapter 5. A map with no edges. The path to the broken shaft was no longer listed on the sanctioned charts. Ryn traced it by feel, not direction, each twist and turn etched in the back of his skull from years of hauling pipe and hauling corpses. Some roots never left the marrow. The prism lay in a felt pouch beside his lamp. He had not dared to listen, not yet. He had learned early the price of half-understood voices in half-forgotten halls. The path led down, always down. First past the reclaimed tunnels used by the ash haulers, then beneath the fungal vents, where blue mold curled like breath around old bones. Farther still, until even the heat pipes gave way to silence. And there, amid the stone, he found it. The forgotten run. The arch was unlit, its frame cracked. The old sigil above the keystone had been chipped away. But Ryn knew the place. Years ago, he had passed it carrying supplies to a surface hatch sealed by flood ice. Even then it had felt, watched. He stepped inside. The walls wept. The air stank of mineral rot. But ahead, faint and pulsing, was light. He followed it, not a flame. Not oil. Something stranger, a kind of biolume woven into threads that traced a path along the stone. He touched one strand. It trembled. This was no miner's marking. This was ritual. The path opened into a small chamber round, ribbed like the inside of a bell. At its center stood a crude altar made of pipe fittings, chain links, and charstone. Upon it lay an open slate etched in a spidery hand. He stepped closer. The writing was recent. To feed the hollow is to feed the pact. Stop the bleeding and the stone will remember. Beneath it, a symbol. A circle broken by a single line. Ryn stood motionless. He had seen that shape before, drawn in soot by a child, whispered through the archive's old grief, etched in the soul of a name too dangerous to speak aloud. He reached for the prism, heart loud against his ribs. With slow care, he placed it against the flat of the altar and pressed. It sang, no words, not at first. Only a resonant hum, as though the hollow itself exhaled. Then, faintly, the voice of Veleth. And if the overseer does not heed, then blood will be the ink. The pact cannot be left to dry. Let those who read this know, I stood the watch. I marked the line. I crossed it not. The recording ended. Ryn stood long in the silence that followed. He turned and looked once more at the walls. And there, half hidden behind a collapsed scaffold, he saw fresh markings, not the symbols of rites or madness. Footprints, small, bare. The girl. She had been here, and the hollow had not stopped her. Ryn felt the shape of a question rise within him, like heat through a vent. What bargain had been made in the dark, and who, now, was feeding it? Chapter 5, a map with no edges. Some roots never left the marrow. The prism lay in a felt pouch beside his lamp. He had not dared to listen. Not yet. He had learned early the price of half-understood voices in half-forgotten halls. The path led down, always down. First past the reclaimed tunnels used by the ash haulers, then beneath the fungal vents, where blue mold curled like breath around old bones. Farther still, until even the heat pipes gave way to silence. And there, amid the stone, he found it. The forgotten run. The arch was unlit, its frame cracked. The old sigil above the keystone had been chipped away. But Ryn knew the place. Years ago, he had passed it carrying supplies to a surface hatch sealed by flood ice. Even then it had felt, watched. He stepped inside. The walls wept. The air stank of mineral rot, but ahead, faint and pulsing, was light. He followed it, not a flame, not oil. Something stranger, a kind of biolume woven into threads that traced a path along the stone. He touched one strand. It trembled. This was no miner's marking. This was ritual. The path opened into a small chamber round, ribbed like the inside of a bell. At its center stood a crude altar made of pipe fittings, chain links, and charstone. Upon it lay an open slate etched in a spidery hand. He stepped closer. The writing was recent. To feed the hollow is to feed the pact. Stop the bleeding and the stone will remember. Beneath it, a symbol, a circle, broken by a single line. Ryn stood motionless. He had seen that shape before. Drawn in soot by a child, whispered through the archive's old grief, etched in the soul of a name too dangerous to speak aloud. He reached for the prism, heart loud against his ribs. With slow care, he placed it against the flat of the altar and pressed. It sang. No words, not at first. Only a resonant hum, as though the hollow itself exhaled. Then, faintly, the voice of Veleth. And if the overseer does not heed, then blood will be the ink. The pact cannot be left to dry. Let those who read this know, I stood the watch. I marked the line. I crossed it not. The recording ended. Ryn stood long in the silence that followed. He turned and looked once more at the walls. And there, half hidden behind a collapsed scaffold, he saw fresh markings. Not the symbols of rites or madness. Footprints, small, bare. The girl, she had been here, and the hollow had not stopped her. Ryn felt the shape of a question rise within him, like heat through a vent. What bargain had been made in the dark, and who, now, was feeding it? Chapter 6, Shifts That Never Returned. The roster stone bore no weight to the overseer, but to those who read it with care, it whispered absence. Ryn studied the shift logs deep within the coal counter's annex, far from where the pipes still hissed with breath. The slabs were inked in tally form, each name marked with its daily cut, its zone of labor, and a final glyph to denote return. Most bore the simple spiral of completion. Some had the downward arc of exhaustion. 3 bore the old sigil for unsolved absence. 3 who had vanished in the last 4 cycles. The hollow buried its lost in silence. A fall, a vent failure, an unmarked drift of heatless snow. That was the story told. But their names, Rose Talvin, Erin Had, Mika Vaughn, all appeared on the same circuit. All routed through Shaft 9, all within 5 days of each other. Ryn ran a soot-charred finger over the marks, his breath held, his body still. None of them came back, said a voice behind him. Ryn turned. The girl stood in the shadow of the doorway, her feet bare, her eyes wide with knowing. Lyra. You followed me, he said. She nodded. You should not wander here. They don't see me. She stepped closer. Her hands were stained with dust and something darker. I saw the sign. It changed. The line broke. Ryn crouched before her. What did you see? She reached into her pocket and drew a small coil of wire shaped like a circle with a nick on its rim. It pulsed faintly. They took one of them, she whispered. And one of them stayed. He talks to the stone. He tells it stories. Ryn took the coil from her and felt a hum faint but there, like something remembering. He rose, heart heavy. You've seen too much. She looked up at him, unblinking. You have too. He walked her back through the upper ducts, past the dormant hammerworks and the salt rooms where mushrooms grew in quiet rings. The hollow lived in layers, and the girl walked them like one born to it. No one stopped them, no one spoke. When he returned alone, he visited the mess hall of the East Barracks. The shift had just turned. Few remained. But he found Kale Vorin seated alone at the steam vent bench, hands wrapped around a tin of sour brew. Ryn sat across from him, said nothing. Kale stared into his drink. They won't listen. They never did. Ryn laid the wire on the table. 3 gone, not cave-ins, not drift. Chosen. Kale's jaw tightened. You found the altar. Ryn nodded. Kale leaned forward. Then listen to me now. There's something older than us down there. Older than the seminary. Older than the pact. I saw it once. Before Velith was gone. Before they sealed the shaft. It was not human. But it spoke. Ryn did not flinch. What did it say? Kale looked up. His voice dropped to a whisper. It said, feed me truth or feed me flesh. And in the stillness that followed, Ryn understood the hollow was not merely hungry. It was listening. Steam exhaled from fissures no hand had cut, rising in long white coils through vent stacks and heat sinks like incense through a cathedral. The miners paid it no heed. To them, it was warmth, power, danger. But Ryn now heard something more. A pattern beneath the hiss, a rhythm beneath the roar. He stood before the old vent tunnel where Lyra had once vanished and laid his hand upon the pipe. It thrummed, not like a machine but like a voice caught behind steel. Kale joined him, lantern held low. You're certain she came this way? Ryn nodded. There are smudges along the hatch ring, small palms, fresh. They forced open the hatch and descended. The passage narrowed, turned, dipped. A warm wind stirred from below, strange in its scent. Not iron, not oil. Something sweeter, older. Earth with memory. At last the crawl gave way to a dome-like cavity. The walls were lined with soot, mirrors and broken glyphs. In the center, half buried in old slag, sat an altar of sorts, not like the one before. This one breathed. Pipes fed into it from unseen channels. The top was rounded metal, vented, etched with ancient sigils no longer taught. It pulsed faintly, in time with the steam, as though the hollow itself was speaking through it, and before it, kneeling, was the child. Lyra did not turn. She held her hand above the altar and whispered. The air shimmered. Ryn stepped forward. Lyra. She turned slowly. Her eyes shone, not with light, but with knowing. It heard you. It remembers. Kale knelt beside the altar. This is pre-pact. This is before even the naming of the seminary. I've seen fragments of these designs in forbidden drafts. Lyra stood. It told me the truth has a cost, that someone must give it shape. Ryn crouched before her. And what did it ask of you? She looked at him solemn. To bear the memory, to keep the flame until it is named. Kale whispered. The Watcher. It's not a creature. It's not a creature. It's a voice. A witness, an echo made of steam and stone. Ryn laid his hand on the altar. The warmth passed into his skin, and with it images, not visions, not dreams, but remembered spaces. The severance. Blood spilled by necessity. A pact brokered not for power, but for survival. Veleth's hands, open in prayer, refusing to kill. Another stepping in his place. And then, silence. A silence imposed. Buried. Enforced by the seminary itself. He pulled his hand back, the altar sighed. Lyra spoke once more. They made the truth into a lie, but the hollow didn't forget. Kale stood. The overseer will come. He'll silence this again. Ryn turned to the wall and saw a hatch etched with fresh glyphs. Some from Lyra's hand, some older, almost burned into the stone. It was a path, a way deeper. They can try, Ryn said. He looked once more at the altar, still pulsing, still warm. The hollow has spoken. Now we answer. Only the blackened glyphs of the old accord. Ryn moved ahead with Kyle close behind, their lamps dimmed to a flicker. Lyra had remained above, reluctant but obedient, her gaze heavy with knowing. She had marked the door behind them with a circle of her own making, drawn in chalk and ash. The air was hot, not by fire, but by pressure. The heat pushed against the lungs, dense and wordless, as if the hollow had grown tired of silence. They passed beneath an arch of fused bone and metal. Beyond it, the cavern opened into a chamber of twisted heat vents and luminous moss. And there, slumped against a shattered turbine coil, was a body. Ryn knelt. The man was burned beyond easy naming. But the patchwork jacket, the claw chisel on his belt, Ryn knew the make, knew the man, Mika Varn, one of the missing three. But it was not the burns that held Ryn still. It was the expression serene, as if Mika had died in peace. Ryn touched the man's chest, still warm. Kale whispered, "No one should have been able to reach this far." Ryn's eyes moved to the walls. They were scarred, but not randomly. There were symbols like the others, but sharper, angrier, carved by someone whose hands did not tremble. He stood, breath slow, gaze falling on a narrow passage just beyond the corpse. A trail of melted slag marked its floor. They followed. And then, without warning, the chamber opened again, revealing a platform of black glass suspended over a lake of molten ore. Above, set into the curved ceiling, was a dome of reflective metal, and in its center, mounted like a crown, burned a slow, steady flame. Not fire. Something older. A heat sign. Ryn stepped toward it, but Kale caught his arm. Look, at the far edge of the platform knelt another figure, smaller, fragile, Lyra. Her head was bowed, her hands lay in her lap, and she was not breathing. Ryn ran. The stillness shattered. Kale shouted. The hollow groaned. He reached her and fell to his knees. She was cold. No mark, no wound, only stillness and the faint trace of heat around her temples. The flame above flickered. Ryn held her, arms unmoving, face unreadable. Kale knelt beside him, voice hollow. She came after us. Followed somehow. Why? Ryn laid her gently on the platform and stood. The rage was in him now, old, familiar, hungry, but he closed his eyes and breathed. Because it chose her, or she chose it. The walls shook. The dome above them pulsed. Kale whispered, "What now?" Ryn stared into the flame. Its core shifted, and for a moment he saw a face, his own, reflected in molten truth. "Now," he said, voice iron, "we go deeper." He did not weep, he did not speak her name again, but something in him, long buried, had awakened. And the hollow knew. The hollow offered no comfort, no warmth, no chant, no rite. The paths wound as they always had, unfeeling, unchanged. But the air moved differently around Ryn Gavelock. Doors that once creaked slow opened quickly. Shadows shrank before his lamp. Kale said nothing. He walked a step behind, the coil of his keys muted in his grasp. There was no ritual for a child who was not meant to be there. No name to offer to the watchers. Only a weight that would not lift. At the threshold of the archive, Niron stood waiting. She did not ask. She saw the shroud, and she bowed her head. She was touched, she said. The hollow remembers its chosen. They laid the girl in a nook beside the first marker wall. Isla brought stone dust and a wax chisel. With careful hands, she etched her name. Lyra, flame bearer, memory keeper, returned. Ryn did not linger. He moved to the listening chamber deep behind the archive stacks where whisperglass lay in shelves of frozen silk. Not all were readable. Some were warped by time, others sealed by intent. But one shard now pulsed. He reached for it. It was marked with the same seal as the prism Isla had given him before. The sigil of pre-pact, the sign of Veleth. He pressed the shard to the reader helm and lowered the hood. Light rippled across the wall. Voices emerged, fractured and raw. "No more blood," I said. "No more bargains." They took the rites and twisted them, turned pact into prison. Not the mystics, not the overseer. Someone deeper, beneath the seal, beneath the flame. Then a new voice, quieter, older, not Veleth. He warned us. He bore the name of the hollow once, but we erased it, marked him unmade. Then silence. The lights faded. The shard cracked. Kale stood by the doorway. Veleth was never the danger. "No," Ryn said, voice cold. He tried to stop it. Kale stepped forward. "If someone below has turned the Watcher's purpose, if they've fed it wrong, then we find them," Ryn said. He walked to the central map table and swept aside the sanctioned layers. Beneath them, drawn in soot and grief, were the true lines. Old lines. One led to the lowest hollow, a buried shaft beneath the seminary itself, marked only with a single word, Vigil. Kale read it aloud. "I thought it was a myth." Ryn stared at the mark. "No," he said. "It's where they buried the first oath." He rolled the map and turned to go. Behind him, the walls echoed. A voice. Lyra's voice, or something wearing it. Truth is a name the hollow forgets until someone speaks it again. Ryn did not turn. He did not need to. He had already chosen the shape of his next step. Chapter 10, Blood as the Tithe. The air grew sharp, metallic and heavy with echo. It was not just heat that pressed upon them now. It was judgment. They passed through a vault of shattered gears where the names of the first steam rites had once been engraved. The plates had been scorched clean. Something had come through fire. Far below, at last, they reached the gate. It stood 10 spans high, carved from fused slagglass and sealed by a circle of iron set with old bone. No lock, no sigil, only a basin. Kale stepped forward first, then stopped. He looked at Ryn, who said nothing, but unsheathed the thin ritual blade he had carried since his days as a surface scout. The blade had drawn lines in snow, in wax, in oath, never in flesh, until now. He drew the edge across his palm, slow and clean. Blood fell into the basin. The iron groaned. The gate opened. Vigil was a chamber of silence, wide, round. Its walls were lined with columns, each etched with forgotten names. Each name struck through with ash. At its center stood a figure, not cloaked, not robed, not masked. The man who turned to face them was old, worn, his hair white, his body narrow as a blade that had known too many whetstones. "Ryn Gavelock," he said, voice soft. Ryn froze. "You know me?" The man nodded. "I knew your father. Before the pact, before the seal, I knew Veleth too. I watched them all fall away." Cale narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" The man stepped forward. "My name was once Solrum Caith. I was the first warden of Vigil, before the seminary rewrote the lines, before memory was declared dangerous." Ryn's jaw tightened. The name meant little to him, but the title did. "You guarded the Watcher." Solrum nodded. "I fed it. I listened to it. I ensured it remembered what we could not bear to carry." That was the purpose of the Watcher. A construct of flame, stone, and rite. A memory vessel, old as the first breach. It was not a god, it was a burden, a necessary one. Cale stepped forward, voice low. "Why were the names stricken? Why the killings?" Solrum's face darkened. "Because when the Hollow's pact was forged, it was meant to bind a truth too vast to be spoken. The Watcher was the guardian of that pact, a living library, if you will. But when fear grew, when the seminary rose in power, they chose silence over knowledge. They turned the Watcher into a threat rather than a keeper." Ryn's voice was steady. "And Veleth?" Solrum sighed. "He would not take blood. He would not silence the voices. He believed the Hollow could survive with truth, that memory could be born. The seminary disagreed. They ordered his silence." Cale stepped back, breath catching. You were the one who did it." Solrum did not deny it. "They gave me the choice, to kill him or see the flame die. Without memory, the Watcher withers. Without blood, truth fades. I made a trade. Blood for survival. One life for the pact's breath." Ryn's eyes burned. "And the others? Mika Van, Ross, the girl." Solrum's voice grew quiet. "They remembered, not because they were told, but because something in them called back. The Watcher marks such souls. I did not want to kill, but I feared what would come if the memory rose too fast, too loud, if the seminary sensed rebellion in the flame." Ryn's hand went to the blade again. His palm still bled. "You murdered the girl." Solrum's face broke. "No, I did not touch her. She came willingly. She gave herself. The Watcher drew her, not I. She bore the memory as few ever have." Cale's voice was raw. "And now?" Solrum looked up. "Now the flame burns too bright. The Hollow is waking. It remembers the pact, and it remembers the price. If we do not guide it, if we do not shape that memory, it will consume us all." Ryn's blade remained lowered, but his voice struck like stone. "Then I will shape it, with truth. No more silence." Solrum nodded once. "Then you must enter the Watcher's flame. You must give it form. Give it name." As he spoke, the gate behind them sealed. Above, deep within the carved halls of the seminary, the Watcher stirred, and for the first time in generations, it waited for truth, not tribute. Chapter 11, The Watcher Speaks in Tongues. They descended once more, this time not through stone alone, but through fire. The tunnel that led from Vigil's heart spiraled downward in a slow arc, its walls lined with heat glass veined in flickering red. Each step pressed heat into bone, each breath seared with steam. The hollow was no longer passive. It exhaled with purpose. KL staggered once, but Ryn offered no pause. The blade at his belt remained stained, and the blood had dried without clotting. That, too, was a sign. At the end of the descent stood a vault, not built, but grown, formed of overlapping ribs of stone, fused by impossible pressure. Within, a stair of carved brass led to a dais hovering above a lake of molten ore. And upon that dais, encased in a sphere of vapor and runes, burned the heart of the hollow, a being formed by memory, fed by sacrifice, preserved by flame and oath. Its shape shifted constantly, rings of fire and spirals of molten stone, fragments of names and glyphs, half-formed, half-forgotten. As Ryn approached, the flame dimmed. Kale held back, his breath ragged. "You do not have to." "I do," Ryn said. He stepped into the fire. The heat did not burn. It unmade. He felt his name lifted from his body like cloth peeled from skin, his sins, his shames, the long walk from surface exile to hollow ghost, all laid bare. Voices flooded his mind. The first speaker was Veloth. Truth must be preserved, but never at the cost of innocence. Then Solrum. Memory is weight. I carried it because no one else would. Then the girl, Lyra's voice. You listened. That is why it chose you. Then silence. Then language, a rush of pattern and light of understanding too vast to hold. Images, the forging of the pact, the first breach into the hollow, the fire that would not die. A council of voices in robes not yet called mystics. A choice, to let the truth be known, or to seal it beneath layers of blood and forgetting. Ryn saw it all. The hollow had once been a place of balance, fire and flesh, memory and silence. But fear had turned balance to control, and now, with too many truths buried and too much blood spilled, the Watcher could no longer distinguish memory from vengeance. It would rise, unless given shape, unless named anew. Ryn stood in the center of the flame, and with every ounce of will, he whispered a single name, Lyra. The Watcher shuddered. Light spilled through the chamber as warmth. He spoke again. Her memory is truth. Let it be your seed. Let it be your bond. The flame turned gold, then pale, then clear, and then, without sound, it vanished. The dais remained. The lake below cooled to stone. Kale stumbled forward. Is it done? Ryn looked up. His voice was quiet but carried. No. It has begun. The Watcher was not extinguished, it had listened, and in doing so, it had changed. In his hand, where the flame had touched him, Ryn now held a seal, a mark of memory, a vow remade, and high above, the walls of the seminary trembled from remembrance. Chapter 12, The Vein of the Living Stone. They rose from the deep as those who had heard the earth speak. The path behind them closed with silence, but it did not feel like death. The hollow no longer breathed with dread. As they passed through the ancient steamwells, Kale walked beside Ryn without words. His hands still trembled, but not from fear. Something in the heat of that lower flame had settled the weight upon him. He carried the burden still, yet its shape had changed. They emerged at the junction beneath the eastern vent fields, where the workers' footfalls marked the rhythms of survival. Men and women toiled as they always had. No one noticed the difference in the air. No one saw the seal Ryn bore upon his palm. But something had shifted. At the center of the hollow, the overseer stood in solemn posture before the old archive gate, surrounded by council guards. His robes were drawn tight with command. Yet his voice faltered when he saw Ryn step forward. "You were forbidden beneath vigil," the overseer said. "You defied order." "I followed memory," Ryn replied. And it answered, He opened his hand. The seal burned faintly with meaning. The air near it trembled. The guards moved to block him, but Kael stepped beside him. Let him speak. Isla Niron, silent until now, stepped from the shadows near the gate. Her hands held an old volume. Her blind eyes faced the overseer. "We recorded a lie," she said. "We silenced the past, and we paid in blood. That payment is ended." The overseer reached for ritual words, but they crumbled on his tongue. He turned, slowly, and walked away. No guards followed. Before the gathered workers, Ryn knelt and pressed the seal to the stone. The hollow answered. A low hum moved through the vents. Glyphs long buried lit along the ground. Lyra's name emerged first, then Veleth's. Then others struck once from record, now reborn. The seminary opened its gates in silence. The mystics came forth in robes of ash gray, their faces bare. They stood at the edge of the plaza as the hollow breathed with a new rhythm. Solrum Caith stood among them. "I did what I thought would preserve us," he said. "But fear cannot guide a vow." Ryn stood beside him. "Memory can." That evening, as the shift bells tolled and the fires dimmed, Ryn walks alone to the child's memorial, stone-marked, soot-rimmed. He placed his hand upon it. "You bore more than we deserve to ask." He did not weep. He stood until the last of the day's warmth faded. From that day forward, the hollow changed. No longer sealed in silence, no longer ruled by forgetting. The Watcher had not vanished. It whispered still, but now it whispered with names. And names were where the healing began. Epilogue. Years passed, the hollow still mined, still labored, still endured. But every year, at the turn of the heat cycle, the people gathered in the central hall. They spoke the names of the remembered. Ryn Gavelock never rose to speak first. But when the time came for Lyra's name, his voice was always steady. And when the Watcher stirred deep below, it listened for truth. And in that listening, it remained at peace.